no matter what the scale, the any economic enterprise, from a guy selling hot dogs in the street to mega corporation, whatever you want to imagine, okay?
We wouldn't imagine that anymore.
Okay. Any economic enterprise, the local assemblies, who you came in after I was describing the fact that local assemblies engage in mutual agreements, and one of the most important mutual agreements is whether to be in the same common sharing economy. If they decide to be in the same sharing economy with other local assemblies, and you could think of this on a national or even larger scale, that means that within that large group of people, things are shared according to need among those who contribute reasonably according to ability. Okay, the people who, the local assemblies have are the ultimate decision makers. These are all the people in the community who want to, at least, who support equality and mutual aid as those principles. And those local assemblies can decide that a particular individual is not in good standing because they're hogging everything, or they're perfectly healthy and young and everything, and they just sit on the couch all day asking other people to be their servants, or whatever. Okay, but more typically, the local assemblies would look at economic enterprises and evaluate them on the basis of their reputation. And if the reputation, say a hospital, if the reputation of a hospital is good, then the local assembly would say that everyone who is working in that hospital is therefore in good standing, unless someone says, but this guy is taking everything out of the store, and then they might not be in good standing. But at least as far as their contribution being considered, according to ability, if they're in an enterprise which has a reputation for producing something that people think ought to be produced, a service or a product, and sharing it in a way that people think is reasonable, okay, then they're in good standing. Now, the institution itself, and the people in it, want to be in good standing. They want to have a good reputation. So if someone within, the emergency room, say, or in the pediatric ward, say, is flagrantly doing something that gives the hospital a bad reputation, the people there are going to say, hey, look it, we don't want the reputation you're causing, shape up, or we're not going to let you continue to work here, right? I mean, so there's at every level, at every scale, there is a desire to maintain the good reputation. The whole community has a reputation that is evaluated by the other local communities, who can say, any one of them can say, we see what's going on in Smallville, and they're not doing anything to contribute, and they're just taking everything and not providing anything. I don't want to be in a sharing economy with them, and if enough people feel the same way, then Smallville will be told to shape up, or you're not going to be in a sharing economy. So this is basic human nature comes into play here, and everything is a question of reasonableness. If someone is producing steel and they're providing it to the places that need steel in a reasonable way, fine. If they're not doing it in a reasonable way, then people will start saying, something's wrong here, and ultimately, the question is whether you're in good standing or not in the sharing community. And there's a huge motive to be in the sharing community because better to be in an economy, a sharing economy, that with millions of people producing products and services, that only can be done by millions of people, than to be in some little, village all by yourself, that can only produce corn or whatever, So this is a vision of how we can have an economy which is a sharing economy. You notice that there's no rich and no poor. Among the people who contribute according to ability, obviously that means children don't have to work. It means older people, after a retirement age, are not considered to have to work. I mean, people are reasonable. People make reasonable decisions. But it means that no one's rich or poor. It also means that there's no way for corruption to really get a toehold, because corruption, the way corruption works is someone gets rich, but they hide how they got rich. The fact that they have 10 mansions and a huge boat and caviar every night is not identifiable as evidence that they did anything wrong. See? Because maybe they got it legit, right? Maybe they got it by, investing in the stock market or killing in the whatever, right? So corruption, there's a big motive for corruption when all you have to do is hide how you got the money. But if it's a society in which being a hog is per se considered wrong, it's like a society in which pedophilia is known to be wrong. You can't say, well, I got a certificate that allows me to do it, right? It's legit for me to do it, right? People say, no, there's no legitimate reason for doing it. And as a result, pedophilia is not as blatant as it would be as if, you could buy a certificate to own a child, right? So there is a vision of a better society, even though it's one that most people are not familiar with. And it's summarized in 2 paragraphs in this, I believe. So what I would like to do now is to talk about the significance of what's hanging on the wall. And I'll try to be brief because I don't want to take up the whole time. But what's hanging on the wall is the statement, this I believe, we call it TIB, T-I-B for short. And I want to read it to you, okay, because it's not a watered down statement. We're collecting signatures for it. It's not a watered down statement. It's not the lowest common denominator statement. It's a statement which addresses the big problem that we have and doesn't shy away from acknowledging that it's a big problem and proposes a big solution and doesn't shy away from acknowledging that it's a big solution that's required. So let me read it. It says, to my neighbors near and far. It's not a petition, in other words. It's for signatures to be displayed to the public. So it's not we're not going to present this to Governor, Duval or anything like that. To my neighbors near and far, this I believe. Something is very wrong about our society today. It should be based on the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But instead it is based on the opposite. He who has the gold makes the rules. The ones with the gold celebrate greed and looking out for number one, destroy the environment for personal gain, like BP did to the Gulf, and pit people against each other to control them. In the United States, we have a fake democracy. Big money owns the media and political parties, controls the electoral process and politicians, and determines government policies, which have nothing to do with campaign promises or what most people want. This is not right. Our capitalist economy is based on and perpetuates enormous economic inequality. Most people are merely hired hands working for and required to obey employers who claim, illegitimately, to personally own the earth's land and minerals as well as the material and intellectual wealth produced by millions of working people. The poorest people do the hardest work and enjoy the benefits of socially produced wealth the least. The richest do the easiest work in great luxury or do no work at all and enjoy the lion's share of these benefits. This is wrong. We, the undersigned, want real democracy and an economy based on equality and concern for one another and generations yet unborn. Laws should only be made by meetings at the local level open to all who support equality and democracy. Social order on a larger scale, such as complex economic coordination, should be achieved by voluntary federation of local communities and workplaces, not by laws written by so-called, quote, representatives in distant capital cities or by commands from CEOs imposed from above. We should all equally own and enjoy the benefits of the Earth's resources and the wealth that we produce by working together, with nobody being rich or poor. The principle of our economy should be from each according to ability to each according to need. a golden rule idea as old as the Bible, Acts 4:34-35. Work should be for shared goals, to produce things that people need and want to share freely, not buy and sell. A greedy, rich, and powerful minority who were never elected and therefore cannot be unelected prevents Americans from making ours a more equal and democratic society, which is why we need a revolution to remove them from power. So that's not your typical watered down lowest common denominator statement. And here's the amazing thing. How did this statement come to be? Abram, my son, said to me around 2012, he says, Dad, we need a way to prove to people that most people have these values and ideas and aspirations. We can't just assert it. Most people don't believe it because the mass media, you never see anybody expressing these ideas in the mass media, not coincidentally. So he said we should write a statement and have people sign it. So I sat down to writing a statement. I wrote this, and Abram and I said, yeah, it seems okay, and everything. So now what? So I live in the Cleveland Circle area, in Brighton, on Strathmore Road. I took a clipboard, I put this statement, I ran my printer, I printed a version of it. I went outside my door onto the sidewalk. The very first person who came walking down the sidewalk, I said, excuse me, I just wrote something. I wonder if you'd read it and let me know if you'd like to sign it. He signed it. Second person walking down the sidewalk, signed it. Third person signed it. I thought, this is really interesting.
Just the fact that you got somebody to read it is amazing.
That also, by the way, that's a good point. Then I went to the reservoir where people jog around the pond, and I asked people if they weren't jogging too fast, if they'd stop and read it, and the ones who did stopped and read it, and they signed it, one right after the other. I mean, this was okay. So then, for a while, it was just sort of a little bit like a curiosity, like, this is interesting, something to tell your friends that people are signing it and show it to them and so forth, And then Abram and I read this book that inspired us to think big. And we can get into what the book is later, but it's not that important. But we decided, well, how should we think big? And we decided, let's get a majority of Americans to sign this. That's 130 million people, by the way. So we basically...
voting adults, you mean?
Yeah, adults, right. So we basically decided, you don't get people excited about something trivial. You get people excited about doing something that really can change the world. And we talked about it, and what we knew, you came in after we talked about this.
Sorry about that.
But the biggest obstacle to people getting together to change things on a big scale in this way is hopelessness. It's so thick you can cut it with a knife. It's hopelessness that comes from having no sense that there's a better alternative, and even if one does think that there's a better alternative, it comes from thinking that you're a tiny, hopelessly small, weak minority in even wanting it. So what's the point? Even talking about it, right? So we decided we need, for 130 million Americans, to know that 130 million Americans have signed this document and feel this and want it, because then people will have what's missing today, which is confidence that comes from knowing you're in the majority with a shared, inspiring vision. And then it makes it possible for people with that confidence to build a revolutionary movement that makes this goal explicit, and that where people demonstrate their determination to win it, and then it becomes apparent that this is a movement that can win if the critical mass of soldiers in the U.S. military refuse orders to attack it. It becomes possible to appeal to this critical mass of soldiers and say, refuse those orders. Instead, help us defend ourselves against those who might attack us violently. And when the critical mass sees that this is a movement that, A, they support its goals, it's a movement of their friends and neighbors and relatives and people, you know, that are essentially the people they come from. And C, and this is the real challenge, we already got A and B. C, this is a movement which if they support it, they might be on the winning side and not get executed as a traitor. That's an important consideration. That's why soldiers don't disobey orders, not because they think the orders are wonderful, it's because, you know, they're under severe, sharp discipline, right? So,
Well, oh, excuse me, but I thought I read something online from your literature about the revolution being peaceful.
well, you know, if you think that the wealthy people who run society will
Lie over it, lay over it,
lie,
down. and-
lie down peacefully,
Yeah.
and then it will be peaceful.
Mhm.
But I don't think that we should put all our eggs in that basket. I think that we need to deal with the reality that it's quite likely that, I mean, these are not peaceful people, you know.
Right.
What they do to other governments is violently overthrow them
Right.
without
Yeah,
even
that's true.
thinking twice about it. And they use violence against Americans. They drove Occupy out of Dewey Square and all the other places with police violence. I mean, you know, and by the way, that police violence, Naomi Wolf wrote an article about it.
Mhm.
It was directed firsthand by bankers. You know, you think it was the chief of police and the normal political, she showed it was
Oh,
bankers
Wall Street.
directing the violence against Occupy. It's an interesting fact. Anyway, the important point is that we can prevail. We can persuade a critical mass of soldiers to refuse those orders. And that is how the rich lose power. So it's not out of the question. People say, oh, well, what about the 82nd Airborne Division? The 82nd Airborne Division is made up of people,
Right.
most of whom would probably sign this.
Right.
You know?
Uh-huh.
So,
That would be, standing outside.